Well, this sermon is entitled, After the Election, the Laundry, in honor of the American Buddhist Jack Kornfield's book called After the Ecstasy, the Laundry. In it, Kornfield says that we know that after the honeymoon comes the marriage, or after an election, the hard task of governance. In spiritual life, he says, it is the same. After the ecstasy, the laundry. Now, when I started on this sermon, I did not know what would happen on Tuesday. I almost expected lawyers to tie up the results until the end of November. But alas, it came to completion quickly. And some here, probably many, are pleased with the results, but some are not. And our task now is to move to the laundry, to the work of being a nation. We still live in the most divided country that we have lived in maybe since the Civil War, and we have those who feel optimistic about the future and those who feel defeated, and those who feel like nothing has changed at all. The challenges ahead are great. In one fantasy world of mine, I see Governor Romney sitting back, thanking his lucky stars he was not elected. My 8-year-old son on the day after the election said, "Dad, is Romney still crying?" The question for us is, what is the spiritual, moral, and ethical response to our world today and this Sunday after this election? One question is whether now it is our job to save our country and our world, to which most of you would agree probably with Woody Allen, who said, "I'm astounded by people who want to know the universe when it's hard enough to find your way around Chinatown." What is our role now in this country as citizens standing on the fiscal cliff with tax fights and wars on health care ahead, as well as this spiritual crisis of division and all forms of historical amnesia that come over us like a wave? One thing we need to do is take off the bumper stickers and take down the yard signs and become a nation. And I'm not kidding. There's too many yard signs still up in my neighborhood. In attempting to see a way forward, no matter the outcome of the election, I wonder if we can do it, if we can be a country. So in my hope and in my concern before this election, I turn, as I do often, to the writers of the world, and this time to Barbara Kingsolver. She wrote a book in the days following the September 11th events called Small Wonder. I think she actually wrote it the day after September 11th. It is raw. And the opening story in her book brings us back below the questions of divisions and hurts to what it means to be alive. It's a story that takes place in the hills of the Lorestan province in Iran. It's a story about a couple, a family coming back from the fields in the evening as the sun sets. And as they are walking back toward the village, they are met by the young girl who is caring for their children, running toward them, tears in her eyes, a terror on her face. As she reaches the couple, she says, "The child is missing." This child is just large enough to be able to get away, but not large enough to get too far. All of us who've been parents know both the terror of a missing child and the terror of the child who begins to walk. The child is missing, and so the parents and the girl search the home and all the familiar hiding places, and they do not find it. And they go out into the village and they ring the alert, and everyone comes to seek for the child, and they look through the entire village, and night comes, and day comes, and the following night comes, and the child is missing. No one wants to utter the word bear, as the bears live around in the hills above the village. But a group comes together in the village, and they go up into the hills. And they go up to the caves that smell like brown bears. And they stop at the edge of each cave, and they listen, and they hear nothing until the last, before the sun goes down on the third evening, and they hear a cry of a child. Only the courageous say, "We'll go in." And as they go in, their eyes adjust to the darkness, and they see there the hump of the animal. And they wonder, where is the child? As they move closer, and you probably guessed it. The child is there, curled up in the arms of the bear. Now, Kingsolver says she doesn't know how the story continues, but the child is saved. And beyond that, the child has been fed. Because the bear, a mother bear, had lost her cubs and was lactating, and fed the child, nourished the child in health, and returned him to his family. Kingsolver admits that one of your responses in hearing that story will be impossible. Or she says, you could read this story and think of how warm lives are drawn to one another in cold places. Think the unconquerable force of a mother's love. Of course the bear nursed the child. Small wonder, she says. This force, I say, is the force of human beings, of creatures in the world trying to transcend differences, to help each other, and to move on. Of course, the story has a strong impact on the day after September 11th, but for today, what does it mean? Kingsolver says, in a world with these small wonders, how shall we respond to life? Now, I'm not much for miracles, which is how some people will explain that story. Where my wife sees miracles, I see coincidence. We have this conversation all the time at the kitchen table. Where once a friend is filled with cancer and the next he is free, my wife sees miracles, I see medicine and things we don't know about the body. Where the meeting of two siblings in a far-off land who have lost each other is seen as a miracle, I see chance encounter. Now, I know the belief in miracles can come from a deep despair, an understanding that life is half life and half death, and that we have this deep need of assurance of good things. But I never see the bending of the rules of physics or the manipulation of the universe for one or another to be the real answer. What miracles I see, the miracles I see in the world are the human kind, the kind about people sharing what they have when they have little, of crossing borders that separate them from one another, of not giving up when despair runs the table, of making offerings to bears outside their cave each year with the acorns of the land in gratitude for the child returned. I see it when we cross the borders of our tribal identities and in flashes when we see we are not separate but one. I see that when we hear the stories of people or species reaching out across a very clear and genuine border, and the bear doesn't eat the child but loves him, telling us in a metaphorical way to do likewise. Maybe that story should be in the Bible. So the challenge today, it seems, is to find a deeper spiritual response like King Solver found to that day for us to the world's problems. And to date, I see a shallow response. My Republican friends are not letting up. They are predicting doomsday. They are chiding their Democratic friends for making bad choices. And my Democrat friends are mostly relieved, but want to act out the urge to gloat. They are like those Yankee fans who wear the t-shirts. We won over 50 World Series, and you Red Sox fans have 2. Now, when Obama won in 2008, I was criticized by some in the church for not allowing the church to celebrate when I asked people to take off their buttons and their bumper stickers so that we would know we are not a church of one party. And the message is the same today, but in a different time, because we are called to the spiritual work of this church to respond from a deeper place to our world. The test of our rhetoric is how we treat each other, said Reverend Alan Jones of Grace Cathedral in San Francisco. The test of our orthodoxy is if you were in charge, would I be safe? That spirit is in the founding of our country. The founding fathers and mothers assumed we were all equal and had dignity under God no matter what party we rooted for. That is the power of faith they believed existed in us, not to see each other with rose-colored glasses, but to count on human beings to be in the image of God and to live up to it. To have a bigger view of humanity. Now, this is where science sometimes fails. In his amazing intellect, Stephen Hawking cheerily once said, "Human beings are like algae and amoeba. They are just a chemical scum on a moderate-sized planet." Is that true? I can't believe that would be true. At least from this perspective, with robes and stoles on, I have to take a higher view of our humanity. I think our view of the world must be bigger, because I see that religion has said that God has created us in an image, that we must live up to that image by being stewards of the earth and caretakers, that we must act from a deeper place of spirit in all we do. So I say we are ready for a new country, one encouraged in the worship, in the wisdom of religion of the old. In the passage from John 21 that we read today, Jesus comes to the disciples and asks Peter if he loves him. This story has a deeper meaning than even the characters themselves. The English translation falls short, and let me explain. In this chapter on the Sea of Galilee, the risen Jesus questions Peter 3 times, just as Peter had denounced Jesus 3 times. It's significant that this symbol of hope, this risen Jesus, asks Peter not about the fish he is catching, not about how his parents are doing, but about love. 3 times Jesus asks if he loves him, if Peter loves him. The first 2 times, in the Greek, he uses the word agape, the sacred love beyond all love. And the 3rd time Jesus asks, "Do you love me?" he uses the word philia, brotherly love. So the writers of this story are making a shift in the question. And they are pointing to this moment, saying to us that sometimes we cannot see beyond our divisions to a sacred love, to the love of agape. Sometimes we don't notice those small and great wonders. Sometimes we don't see each other as one. But at minimum, we must act from philia. from a brotherly and sisterly love for each other. This is the ancient writer sending us a message through this story, telling us that the laundry of our lives has a minimum requirement, and that is philia. When we think of ourselves as separate, in our tribal ways, we lose track of this spiritual task. And we all have tribes, and we all have identities that help us survive sometimes, but are often easy answers to complicated situations. Elections are good ways to build tribes. I remember that the head of the Southern Baptist Convention, though, noticed how complicated a tribal identity can be. He claimed that he had a headache every day, and then he realized after a while that within his fold, within the Southern Baptist Convention, was Jesse Helms and Jesse Jackson, and Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich. The realization didn't solve his headaches, but it explained a lot. You see, even within our tribes, we have variety, and when we start thinking of any group, ours or theirs, in a block, we are going down a dangerous path that lose sight of the simplest forms of philia and miss a chance at acknowledging agape. Last summer, at a worship that I was at, the liberal Baptist preacher, Buzz Thomas, reminding you the word liberal and Baptist do go together. He said in his theology that God wants us to make common cause. That God is for us, not for my tribe or your tribe, not for the GBLT tribe or for women or for men or for Native Americans or Anglo-Americans or Irish Asian Americans, but for all. That agape is the divine gift, that God is for us. Now, I'm not actually sure what he really meant when he said God is for us. When I hear those things, I think of Annie Lamott's statement in her book, Plan B, when she says, I don't know much about God, only that he or she is love and isn't American. In my mind, God is not for one football team or another. You know this. God is not making decisions about Sandy or who gets the flu or what bear will devour which child or nurse them to health. God is for all. That God is the mystery of life, the holiness of being here, the clarity and purpose to do good and live compassionate, long lives, as our children sang to us this morning. That is where God is, and agape lives. And so God is for us, I say. And at the core of who we are as a country is this notion that God is for us. Say it with me: one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our democracy is and never has been about you, but about us. And when our friends start saying otherwise, we tell them this is nonsense. Our higher calling is to give up a little of what we have so that others can have more. A genuine human value, a genuine American value. And this value is expressed in a Japanese term that says we all eat from the same bowl. When the earthquake and tidal waves in Japan damaged the nuclear power plants, I heard this for the first time. An engineer who was going back to disable the plants so that his land and his people would not suffer said, to be honest, no one wants to go. I know when I go this time, I will return with a body that will not be capable of working in the nuclear power plant. But he said there is a Japanese expression, we eat from the same bowl. These are friends I shared pain and laughter with. That's why I'm going. we eat from the same bowl. So I say to you, Americans, whether your team won or lost, triumphed or failed, appears to be poised to save us or not, we eat from the same bowl. Let us act like it. Let us find solace in our lives together, just people trying to do our parts to repair the world and give back when we can. Let us see that life is filled with small and great wonders. The theme of these past 3 weeks in church has been that small wonders abide, that the human person is loved and free and matters and is made in the image of God, and that means that all our minor allegiances, all our tribal identities are not first, but second or third, that we are sacred no matter what party we root for. We are all spiritual beings. Humans first, spiritual, American, and loved. And that should be our guide. Do you love me? Jesus asked. If we cannot love the world with agape, with a sacred love that breaks down all divisions, then let us practice brotherly and sisterly love. We can do that, and we must. Amen.